Welcome everybody to February AZPosh. So and our sponsor is Tech Systems. They've been with us for almost 2.5 years now. We appreciate it. So I'll turn over the floor to you, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take her away.
It's been my pleasure working with you guys for the past couple of years. A lot of familiar faces, a couple fresh ones. IT staffing and services. If you guys need help with the resumes, or your friends do, or anything like that, even if it's not local, like we have 110 offices across the country, so anybody, anywhere, we can pretty much help them out. It's the way I look at it is like, hey, you don't have to get a job through me, for me to like do my job. It's like I just want to help you guys. So if you have an interview, maybe you haven't interviewed in a long time, and you just want a mock interview, a little prep, something like that, we can help with that too. So. Really just want to like network with everyone and kind of get our name, Tech Systems, out there. And if you guys have any friends that are looking, or if you are trying to negotiate for a raise and need to know like what your salary range would be for someone in this skill set, in this location, like we can look all that stuff up for you and help you guys out. Just kind of give you the tools to own your career. So Tom has all my information. Definitely if you guys need anything, reach out to me. I'm actually going to be out of town next week. And might not be at the next PowerShell meeting, but I'll make sure that someone's here covering for me. So.
Yeah, just send me a note to ask who that'll be.
Definitely.
I don't know who the next speaker is going to be yet. I don't have anybody lined up yet.
Yeah, back to you, man.
Wait. Yeah. We have to ask. You've been to so many PowerShell meetings. Do you know any PowerShell?
So what is it? The F5, right? You hit F5. That's like enter, right?
That's like go.
That's like go. All right. So hey, step one. Cool. That's step one, right? So yeah, a little over my head, but definitely respect everything that you guys do. It's awesome for sure.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you negotiate pay raises when the boss is here?
Yeah. What are you paying this man?
I'm glad you have a good relationship.
He may need your services.
Not recording this, are we?
No, yes.
Well, yeah, thanks guys. Just appreciate sponsoring everybody and being a part of it. It's a cool thing. Cool thing you guys got going. Thank you.
Okay, with that, our speaker for this week is Adam Driscoll, who lives in, one of the beautiful places in the country in Idaho, not far from where I grew up. And he's going to speak to us tonight on PowerShell Universal Dashboard. So with that, the floor is yours, Adam. So
cool. I'm going to give this screen share thing a try. Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can.
All right, you see some cats? All right. Yeah. So any presentation needs as many cat GIFs as possible. So I have my universal dashboard set up here running through some cat GIFs off Giphy. So what we're going to be talking about today is PowerShell Universal Dashboard. It is a kind of a web framework for PowerShell developers that lets you build pretty robust web APIs and dashboards and websites, and we'll just kind of get into what you can do with Universal Dashboard. So from there, I'm going to do this whole presentation with a dashboard that I actually built. So this dashboard's running in one of my PowerShell consoles here, and it's actually hosting this website. You can see I'm just localhost port 999. And pop over to this next page with a little more information about what Universal Dashboard is. So it's, like I said, it's like a kind of a tool set for building web APIs and websites and dashboards and that kind of thing. What it's made out of is ASP.NET Core. So that is Microsoft's new kind of flagship web server and framework, and it's built on .NET Core. So that's all open source and available. So that's kind of what runs Universal Dashboard, and everything kind of is served from ASP.NET Core. The UI that you're looking at here is built with a framework called React, and React is a JavaScript library built by Facebook, and it kind of makes working with single-page applications, which is what this is, a little bit easier, and it kind of makes it a lot more efficient to kind of work with JavaScript. So everything in Universal Dashboard is built on top of the React JavaScript framework. Kind of the look and feel of this particular project is using material design. So material design is a design concept by Google. And it's kind of like what you see with these like cards with the paper, and then just kind of the layout, the look and feels. It's what's called material design. And I'm using a library called Materialize to kind of do the styling. And we're kind of looking at a different library that we're going to be going to bring in some more material design concepts into Universal Dashboard. And then obviously there is PowerShell involved here. So the interface to this whole pretty much API for developing websites is PowerShell. So you write everything with PowerShell scripts. You don't necessarily need to know anything about HTML, JavaScript, or CSS to actually produce these dashboards. So we'll definitely dig into a bunch of script here in a little bit, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the features of Universal Dashboard.
So it does run in Docker?
It runs in Docker. So I have up on the doc site, one of the Microsoft guys came up, put some blog posts together on how to run Universal Dashboard in Docker. So yep, it runs in Docker. It runs on top of PowerShell Core as well as Windows PowerShell. So it's kind of works in both places. And since it runs in PowerShell Core, it can run cross-platform and in Docker. You can host it up in IaaS or Azure. It actually has a service, so you can stand up a Windows service. It's built right into the module. I've even got it running on a Raspberry Pi for like my home automation stuff. So I have like some lights and stuff that I can turn it on and off with a Universal Dashboard that's running on a Raspberry Pi. So that's kind of cool. So like I said, it's cross-platform. It runs on Windows, Linux, and Mac. On Windows, it supports both PowerShell v5 and up, and then PowerShell Core. So some of the stuff that you can do with it, on the right-hand side here, there's like a bunch of built-in controls. Like this is an example of one of the charts that's available. But there's things like text boxes and all the standard stuff you think about in a website. And then on the left-hand side here, we're talking a little bit about REST APIs. So there's some other like web-based projects. You might have heard Polaris. It's another PowerShell project that stands up a web server. Similar to that, this can stand up REST APIs that you can actually interact with from other systems. From things that aren't PowerShell, like you could execute curl command from the command prompt to actually execute these endpoints, and then there's PowerShell scripts. Getting into a little more of the advanced features, there's authentication, so it automatically integrates with OAuth, so you can do things like Microsoft, Twitter, Google, or Facebook authentication. And then you can do like single sign-on through Windows authentication, that kind of thing. And then it's like highly customizable, so that's kind of one of the cornerstone pieces to it is that you can do whatever you want really with some of the commandlets. You can produce pretty much any HTML structure you want, and I'll show you guys how to do that in a little bit. Or you can even create JavaScript components using React and any JavaScript library that you want to do, and then you can host it up in Universal Dashboard and kind of produce commandlets to make it easy for other people to use your cool new controls. So finally, the cool stuff. It's free. So there's Community Dashboard, or there's Universal Dashboard Community Edition, which is free. The only thing it doesn't have is the authentication piece. So I have my own little one-man software company that I am trying to run here. That I have like an enterprise edition that has the authentication in it. But everything else is free, and lots of people are building cool dashboards with all the free stuff. And then it's all open source, and it's up on GitHub. So I'll share some links where you can get this, or check out the code if you're curious about how certain things work and that kind of thing. All right, so that's my spiel about what Universal Dashboard is, but let's actually kind of start futzing with it a little bit. So I have another PowerShell prompt here. So the easiest way to get started with Universal Dashboard is you can just call start UD dashboard, specify some port that you want the server to run on, and then hit enter. And that will actually spin up a kind of like demo dashboard right in your PowerShell prompt. So now you can see that my dashboard's running on port 1234. I go over here, open up another tab. You can see here is just kind of the default dashboard. Gives you some information about where to go, find how the script is implemented, where to get this installed. But the really cool part is if you click over on the left-hand side here is we have a little hamburger menu. and you can click any one of these controls. Yep.
There's a question on YouTube.
Okay.
Is there PUD? I guess he shortened it to PUD container image. Are you going to provide a link to that? Imagine you will.
There is not actually one. I have not created a container image and published it on Docker Hub or anything like that. I will show you guys where the information is about that.
So you have like a Docker file then that somebody could use instead?
Here I can. I'll show you guys the doc where that's documented, because I don't have a Docker file. I haven't actually put that together yet. So.
Okay, fair enough. So whomever asked that on the phone, hopefully we got to your answer.
Yeah.
Or not on the phone, online, I mean.
All right, so here is, like, we have all these example pages for the different controls. So what you'll see here are how the controls look, and then how to create the controls. So underneath each one of these controls, it has just a little example, snippet of what you would have to execute to actually create this control on your page. So you can create buttons or floating buttons. You can hook up buttons to like event handlers, that kind of thing, to create interactive components. The other thing are, like charts. So in this particular page, we don't have examples, but in the other charts page, you can see we have the example text down here about how to create this chart, how to create auto refreshing charts that actually go out and collect the data in the background and then update the UI based on that data and customize the colors. But there's all kinds of cool controls to play with, so you can kind of work your way through this kind of stuff as an example to get started. So let's actually go pop back to this particular dashboard. I'm going to kind of go through some of the basics of this particular module. And what we're going to do is we're just going to edit this presentation.ps1 file that I have right now. So up at the top, I've imported my module, Universal Dashboard Community. And at the very bottom of this script, what I'm doing is I'm creating a new dashboard, specifying a title, and then these are each one of the pages. So I've specified some pages, and that is what is appearing over on the left-hand side here.
So when you start it, does it start up a PowerShell process that runs as a service? Is that what you're doing?
So it's running in this process right here. What it's actually doing, though, is if you look at creating some background run spaces, and then as you execute certain things, it actually executes the scripts in those run spaces. So it's got a run space pool, and then it just picks an open run space from that pool and then executes that stuff in there. So
then when you close your PowerShell prompt, if you will, those run spaces will close, right?
Yep, exactly. So if you were to close this console window, your dashboard would no longer be running.
Okay.
So, there's a couple ways to host it. Like I said before, one of the things that you can do is there is a publish UD dashboard commandlet, and that allows you to actually stand up a dashboard service that runs as a Windows service, and then you just specify a PS1 file for it to execute. It'll pick that up, and then it'll start the service for you on Windows Startup.
Oh, wow, cool. So you could build a whole CI/CD around it then if you needed to.
Yeah. And it also runs in IIS, so if you wanted to host it in IIS, you could do that too. A lot of people do that.
Oh, awesome.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of build some elements inside our dashboard here. Let me get to the part where Okay. Is this text big enough for you guys?
Yes.
All right, sweet. Okay, so the first kind of basic concept that you're going to run into is I guess pages is one thing. I've created several pages, and as you saw below, I passed that list of pages when I say new dashboard. But each page you can create, you can say, new UD page, specify a name, an icon, that's what shows up in the little hamburger menu, that kind of thing. From there, what you can actually do is start putting the content of those pages together. So the way that this is structured is it's kind of like a domain-specific language for developing websites. So as it looks is kind of how it's going to show up inside the website itself. So one thing that I didn't mention, but I did enable on here, it's called auto reloading. So every time I save this file, what it's actually going to do is it's going to go and auto reload this page with my changes. So instead of having to stop and start the web server all the time, every time you save the file, you can pop back to your browser to see how that looks. So
Is that something when you start the commandlet?
yeah, I'll show you where that goes. So down in Start UD Dashboard, there's just an auto reload switch parameter you can specify.
Nice.
Yeah. So, let's see. All right, so the first kind of concept here is layouts. So how your controls kind of flow on the page. The most basic way to do this is with a new UD layout. And what that does is allows you to kind of specify how you would like the columns on your page to behave. So for example, new UD layout with a 4-column layout says that for every 4 controls is 1 row. So you can see there's 6 UD cards in here. And if we go back to the UI, what it's done is it's actually created a 4-column layout. So if I were to add more cards to this, it would just it would fill out that layout further, and it would add another row after it hit that 4th column. So that's pretty much the most basic way to do layouts. To take it a step further is you can actually have a little more control over those columns themselves using new UD row and new UD column. So the way that kind of Universal Dashboard and the materialized CSS JavaScript library we're using works is that you have, for every row, you have X number of columns, and those columns are sliced up into 12 pieces. So if you think about it, you can take out between 1 and 12 slices of that row. So if you have a column that's a size 4, that means it's taking up 1/3 of that row. And then size 2, you can see it's a 1/6, and then 6 would be half. So it's always a 12 pieces to that particular column. So now if we go look at the dashboard, you'll see that like the first column, it's taking up 1/3. The second column is taking up 1/6, and this is taking up 1/2. So that'll give you a little more control on the actual like sizing of them. What you can also do is do things like offsets. So we have a size of 4, but the offset is 2. And what that will produce is something like this, where you have a little blank space because it's offset by those 2 spaces on the left-hand side of that particular card. And finally, what you can do is you can specify sizes based on screen size. So every one of the columns has a small size, a medium size, and a large size. If you only specify the small size, all of the screen sizes will be the same width based on that value. But if you specify a small, medium, and large size, it'll change depending on the screen size. So if I go back to this dashboard, you can see right now it's like this little tiny card. But if I make my screen size a little bit smaller, you can see now it's stretched out further. And then if I go down, like this is like a tablet size, if you can think about it that way. And if I go down to like phone size, then it'll stretch out even further and take up the whole screen. So that kind of lets you create like a layout that will respond to both your desktop and your mobile apps. All right, so that's kind of the basics of sizing. You can kind of get real complex and nest rows and columns and all that kind of stuff, but I'll let you guys play with that. But let's talk a little bit about some of the basic controls and just see some of those in action and how to produce some of that stuff. We'll go to the basics page. I've kind of alluded to this before, but one of the very basic constructs in material design is the idea of cards. And cards are kind of like, they're supposed to look like hovering little pieces of paper over the top of your website. And it kind of gives you this like, shadow around it and that kind of thing. But cards are like containers for like holding data or showing off tidbits of information. And you can use new UD card to produce those types of things. So let's just take a look at this code a little bit. You have this first card, just has a title and some content, and then that content is just some text. You can put whatever content you want in there. You can nest other cards if you really want to get crazy, or like input controls and that kind of stuff. And And then this card actually has a link at the bottom. So what you'll see here is that there's a links parameter. And what that does is it produces this little like action area at the bottom where it kind of separates that action from the top of the card. And then finally, you can kind of customize the style of the card, give it background colors or font colors. Most of the controls allow you to control a lot of the colors, so you can kind of make the look and feel real different. As you can see, like with this one, I went for like a darker theme, so everything is kind of a darker color there. All right. Here's an example of a control that actually uses other controls as content. So rather than just having like text as content, you can also put like other controls. So a collection is just like a list of items. And as you can see here, this collection has collection items, and then that just produces this little collection here. If you want to get a little more fun, you can do things like collapsibles. So not only do you have like these kind of static controls like cards and collection items, but you also have things like collapsibles. So that produces a control where you have these different things that you might want to hide and show depending on what the user is working on, and you can actually click on that, and it'll actually expand and contract based on the user interacting with those controls. And then finally, this is what a lot of people have been. I had originally developed Universal Dashboard not to be as interactive as it is, but a lot of people wanted input controls. So now there's all kinds of input controls that you can put in here. So these are just a couple examples. We have like buttons, and we have checkboxes and switches. That's what these are, on-off switches, drop-down menus, text boxes, all that kind of stuff. So you can pretty much build whatever form you want using this kind of stuff, as well as some helper things to make form building a little bit easier. So those are kind of like the basic controls. Like I said, there's a whole bunch more controls that you can kind of explore when you want. But in terms of basic controls, it's kind of just wanting you guys to get a little feel for how that works. All right, so now here's some of the little more fun stuff. Visualizations. So not only can you create like basic HTML elements and then put them on your page, but you can also like visualize data in different ways. Most simple way to visualize data is a counter. So that kind of just shows a number on the page. So there's some interesting things going on here that I want to talk about a little bit. The main one is that we're using what's called an endpoint rather than a content script block here. So with a content script block, what happens is when the page loads, it sends out all those content script blocks, and then it renders that page. But with an endpoint, what happens is it actually will render the page, and then as that control loads, it will actually go back to the server and then load the data that it's supposed to show. So what that allows you to do is, in this really simple example, all we're doing right now is we're seeing that I've done 4 Strava activities this month, that kind of thing. And if you load the page, what you'll see is it kind of goes from 0 to 4. That's because it loaded, it went back to the server, it called that script block, got its data, and then showed that value. And all I'm doing inside this endpoint is like, this is getting the start and end date for my Strava activities. And then it is grabbing a count of the number of activities that I've done. And that is what is showing in the page here.
So if you run around quickly, they'll increment to 5?
Yes, exactly. Right. I should have set that up. That would have been kind of cool. The other thing that you can do with all these controls that have endpoints is specify auto refresh and refresh intervals. So auto refresh will turn on the auto refresh, and then the refresh interval will allow you to specify how many seconds you'd like the control to wait before it goes back to the server and refreshes that data. So like if you wanted to update this count, let's say, like number of VMs that are on or something like that, that might change more frequently than me doing runs. then you can specify those values to make it auto refresh right on the page as people are looking at it. So counter's okay, it shows some cool stuff. You can put icons. I think you might have noticed that I had a little bicycle icon in the background. Another control that uses the endpoint kind of concept is a table. So there's a little more involved in here. You're specifying new UD table, stating that there's a title, which is the last 10 activities. So we're actually going to go back to Strava and get those last 10 activities I've done. The headers for the table, so those actually appear at the top of the table. So type, date, distance, time, and view. And then again, we're calling an endpoint. So it's going to do the same thing where once the control loads, it's going to go back to the server, get that data, and then send it down to the control to render it. And then what I'm doing here is I'm calling the same get Strava activity commandlet. This time I'm just getting the last 10 items. And then what I'm doing is I'm doing a little like post-processing on those items so that it looks a little bit better in the UI. So for each one of my activities, I'm creating a PS custom object. I'm just outputting the type, but I'm turning the start date into a date time, so it formats the string a little bit nicer. I'm converting meters to miles here so that it is in, I guess, American units. And then I'm turning seconds into a time span, so again, it like renders a little bit nicer in the UI. And then one cool thing that you can do with like tables is you can actually nest other controls in the rows in the tables. So I'm actually going to create a link out to that activity in the table. And then finally, this guy takes care of like serializing that data and sending it down to the control to render it. And then if we go back here, you'll see now I have a table with all the activities past 10 activities I've done. So I had some skis and some hikes and some runs and that kind of thing. And then if you click one of these, it'll actually pop you out to the actual Strava activity. So that's kind of neat. So UD supports both tables and grids. The difference being a table is just kind of static, and a grid you can filter and page and sort stuff. So it's better suited for showing a lot more data than a table is. But it's kind of go through the same process of creating a grid as you would a table. All right. So now let's get a little fancier and show some charts. So just like a table, we have a new UD chart. Give it a title. It has an endpoint, so it goes back to the server and loads this every time. We're going to get this month's Strava activities, and we're actually going to group them by type. So I want to see my Strava activities, and I want to group them by type, and then based on the total number of time spent, I want to produce a chart. New UD chart will default to a bar chart if you don't specify type. So again, I create a PS custom object based on my group object. So I'm grouping by type, and then I'm going over each one of those groups, and I'm selecting the type name, and then I am pretty much summing up all the moving time for that group. So this is the total number of hours I've spent doing each one of these activities, and then I'm going to put it in a chart. And then finally, what UD chart data does is it says, like, these are the properties that I want to put on the different axes of the, well, not the different axes, yeah, I guess different axes of the chart. So the data property being time, and then the label property is type. Then you can specify some colors. And then what that produces is this really kind of ugly chart. But as you can see, I have a Nordic ski on the left-hand side here, about, 3/4 of an hour, 45 minutes, and did a lot of hiking last couple of days, and then some running. So, but yeah, you can put any kind of data. This could integrate with whatever PowerShell module you wanted to kind of show in your chart. All right, and then one more chart I want to show off is just showing you how to create like a pie chart. This time I'm just going to group it by distance traveled rather than time. And then all I'm doing kind of differently is I'm grouping again, summing on a different property, and then specifying the type. And then what that produces is a pie chart. So,
wow, nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of cool. So any questions about that? It's pretty straightforward.
There are a couple questions that Oliver put in your chat session that were from a couple users online.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, I haven't been paying attention. All right. Does one need a paid license to use PoshUD? No. So it is free unless you want the authentication, and there are some like premium chart things that I put in there. So for like 99% of what people build this stuff for, you don't need a license. And then who supports it? I do. I have been mostly supporting this. And there is not a container image right now. No. Let's see. Power Apps also has a PowerShell module. When should one use Power Apps and when should one use PowerShell UD? I don't know how to answer that. I would have to look at the Power Apps PowerShell module, honestly.
Is that all the questions?
I think it's more.
I think it is, isn't
Yeah,
it? Or
it's been busy. Can one implement adaptive rendering so it adjusts based on if it's loading PC or mobile? Yep. So like I showed with the sizes for the layouts, you can adapt so that it based on if it's PC or mobile. And then can one embed Markdown? You can embed Markdown. There isn't a control. So there's a third-party control that will turn Markdown into HTML. There isn't. It depends what you mean by embed Markdown.
It's already been answered by Ian Mullock, who actually has a GitHub repo that he listed in the chat. So there is a plugin, yes.
Oh, okay, yep, and that is the author of that plugin. So, okay, perfect. Okay, sweet.
yeah, one more question in the room as well.
Yeah, sure.
This is Brandon Stevens.
Yeah.
Would there be any benefit in multi-threading the refresh rate? Any benefit at all?
Multi-threading what do you mean by the refresh rate?
Well, your refresh in like the seconds. I'm just thinking of how to get rid of. I'm being too peculiar, I know, but that 0.
Oh yeah, we could get rid of that 0 by fixing that in the control itself. So either you have some sort of preloader or something like that shows not just the 0 and it shows like loading this thing, that kind of thing. I don't think you're ever going to get away from the data not being there right away unless you're doing a content over an endpoint. So anytime that it has to call back to the server, even if you weren't using something like PowerShell Universal Dashboard, it would still probably have some sort of flicker to it.
Would that be where they stick loading images or something?
Exactly, yeah. So what we could do is enhance like the counter control to have some sort of loading rather than a 0, that kind of thing. Yeah. So
Thank you.
But yep, good question.
So you're using it?
Yeah, this is like one of my top 3 modules.
Oh wow, did you hear that, Adam?
Yeah, I've been in contact with you a little bit, so. All right, so now we're gonna move on to some really cool stuff. This is like my favorite part. So charts are cool, but I like making dynamic interfaces. So one of the cool things about Universal Dashboard is it actually integrates with a kind of an ASP.NET technology called SignalR, which is a library built over the top of WebSockets. So when you load up your PowerShell Universal Dashboard, if you have WebSockets enabled, it will create a WebSocket between the client and the server. And then you can do things like this. So I am creating a new UD element. So new UD element is kind of the like very basic command. It doesn't create any one type of element in particular, but it allows you to create like arbitrary HTML tags. So in this case, I'm creating a div. I'm giving it an ID of placeholder. And then we have another control, so a button, giving it the text click me. And then I'm actually implementing the on-click event handler. So this is just a script block. And that script block, it's saved in the Universal Dashboard server side. And then when you click this button, what it's actually going to do is it's going to send a WebSocket request up to the server from the client and then execute this PowerShell. And then this particular PowerShell commandlet, set UD element, allows you to update the state of a particular element that's on the page. So setUD element can change the attributes and the content of other new UD element tags on the page. So once you call setUD element, what it actually does is it sends a WebSocket request down to the client from the server and says, hey, dude, you gotta update this. So this particular commandlet call is saying that the placeholder div tag needs new content, and I want you to put this content in that div tag. So if I go back to, did I not save that? Nope. Back here, and I click that, you can see that there was like a little hidden div tag above that button, and when I clicked it, it actually set that text down and updated that page a little bit. Content.
So you could do it based on events then? Can you listen for events?
Yep. So new UD element actually supports any JavaScript-based event. So if we go back to my first example here, if I can find it, on my on this home page, on the About page, when I was hovering over this stuff, see how that like background div is turning blue and getting a little bit padded. I was actually creating a new UD element and setting the on mouse over and on mouse leave events. So as you scroll over, it's actually executing those script blocks and adjusting this div here and like kind of setting a padding and background color on it. So you can listen to any JavaScript event you wanted.
Oh,
So
nice.
this is kind of where it gets a little complicated for someone that's never used JavaScript or HTML before, because you got to know which JavaScript events to listen to, but it has the ability to do that. So, all right, so let's show some other like interactive things that you can do. Another button. This one's actually going to call Show UD Toast. So we have a really cool toast library in here that does all kinds of like if you don't know what toast is, it's kind of just like a little like pop-up that says like, hey, this has happened, or I've encountered an error, or I saved your changes, that kind of thing. Just little tidbits of information. So this particular commandlet has lots of cool things that you can change, like color and sizing, how long it stays on the screen, that kind of stuff, icons. But I just have a really basic toast here, and when I click this button, I want it to show a toast to the user. So we go back here and go to dynamic interfaces and toast. You can see on the right-hand side here how this toast is popped up. Might be a little hard to see, but I can click it a bunch of times. So
oh, there we go. Thank you. Now we can see it.
all right. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
We have something that's blocking it, so.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So it's just creating a bunch of toasts.
There we go. We can see it now.
All right,
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I love clicking buttons. All right. Oops. Let me go back here. So I'm creating another button that this time we're going to show a modal. So a modal is kind of more up in your face, gray out the rest of the page and show some other content. People might use it for like a loading dialog, like I'm doing here, or you can pop up like more detail about a particular object you've clicked on, that kind of thing. So now if I click the modal, we're going to get a little like loading thing. So just using a preloader and a heading there, and it just has grayed out the whole screen, and then we just have this little guy pop up, and then if you click off of it, it'll like go away. All right, so that is some basic stuff. You can get a little more complicated if you want, and there's some other commandlets for managing elements. So I have this new UD element. It is a UL tag, which is an unordered list. So it's just kind of a list of items. I've given it an ID, and then I've created a button. And when I click this button, I'm actually going to call it Add UD Element. What Add UD Element does is instead of setting the tags properties themselves, it actually adds children elements to that particular element. So I want to add new LI or list items to this UL tag using Add UD Element, and they're just going to contain the current date. So it's just going to create new list items with the current date. Now, if we go back to UI and I click this, you can see every time I click this, it's adding a new date, and the second is changing every time. And then I've created another button that I don't like dates. And when I click that, it's going to call clear UD element, which actually takes an element and removes all its children. So if I go back there and I clear that, all the children go away. All right. And then this is kind of a funny little example that I like to show people. Is like you can actually create like a hidden column, and this hidden column, all it does is it loops forever. And what it'll do is call set UD element over and over again every second, and it'll just update the time. So then what you end up with is a clock. So what's happening in the background is we just have a loop that's going, and it's just firing WebSocket requests down to the client to tell it to update the UI over and over again. So that was just using set UD element on this little div here on this digital. All right, so that's kind of fun. You can build some really cool interactive UIs this way. It gets a little complicated when you start using a lot of these controls at once. You got to keep track of all the UI IDs and that kind of stuff. So we're looking at some new features in some coming versions to do like view model binding, which will allow you to kind of separate your page's like logic from the display. Because right now, the way you end up with a dashboard is you kind of end up with all these controls with all their like, logic in the actual like layout of the page. So we're going to try to make it a little bit easier to separate that for more complex dashboards. But I think for now, this is pretty cool stuff that you can do with PowerShell.
Cool.
All right.
Do you have a video playing element at all?
I do not, but if like HTML supports a tag, I think for that, and you could do that if you
want to, yeah.
Do element.
Hey Adam, could you actually just like build up a skeleton, kind of talk about an Active Directory schema, like already have it pre-made and just push it in there, like just ready to go?
Did I push? You mean like for Universal Dashboard, like a?
Yeah, just like an instantaneous website, depending on if you're like 2008 or 2, just like whatever. I guess it will instantly mold to your environment.
Yeah, you definitely could. So like all these controls and stuff like that, like you could make dynamic in terms of like these are all script blocks. So like if you have, let's say like, based on your schema, you want to do something and you want to for each, some stuff. And then you did something like this, and then you put that in there. You can make this dynamic and build this dynamically. So if you had some data like a schema, you could actually create these controls dynamically. There's no reason it has to be static like this, how all these examples are.
Thank you.
Yep.
Tom, I have a question for you. Are you going to take that script that parses CM face logs and make it a nice little GUI interface?
I could.
Yeah.
Could do that. Man, this is great stuff, Adam. I could think of all kinds of stuff I could do with it. I didn't realize it was free.
Yeah. So yeah, the Community Edition came out probably, I don't know, a couple months ago now. So
I just didn't realize it was free.
Yeah. Yeah, so start making some dashboards. All right, so I think a couple more things I want to show off. Custom elements. So I'll show first just kind of some basic custom elements. Like I said before, you can use new UD element to create whatever you want in terms of HTML tags. So if I just created this HTML tag here, which is a div, specify some styling for it, give it some content, what it actually produces is an HTML tag like this. So a div with a style, and then that content. So then when you go to the page, what did I do? I broke it. Oh, there you go. You have a div up at the top with padding, and it's black in the background and white text. And you can do cool stuff like, for example, like HTML has an SVG tag, so you can go crazy and draw stuff. So this is the vector graphics tag, and then I want it 400 by 180. pixels. I want to draw a rectangle with some rounded corners. That's 150 by 150. I want to fill it with red, give it a black like border, and then give it some opacity so it doesn't show up super bold. And now I have an SVG rendered image on there. So yeah, you can just kind of do whatever you want with HTML tags, just using new UD element. But in the new version, which is coming out next Monday, if everything goes according to plan, version 2.3 of Universal Dashboard is going to make it way easier to use custom JavaScript components. So right now, I have created a module that had some charts in it. One of these charts is a Sparklines chart. So Sparkline is like a very small little chart that you'd usually put in like a table in the corner of a website, just kind of like give you a little visual representation of a little tidbit of data. You know, it's not like a full-fledged chart that you hover over and click on and all that kind of thing. It's just like a little tiny chart called a Sparkline. So I'm using this new UD Sparklines commandlet, which I've actually imported down here at the bottom. I just have this Universal Dashboards charts commandlet that has this custom Sparklines control in it. Now if I go back to my page, what you'll see is I actually have that Sparklines control running in Universal Dashboard. So I've actually imported this outside of Universal Dashboard, and now I have this custom JavaScript control that's kind of like auto-loading this little Sparklines control here. So I hope to make it a little bit easier to expand the ecosystem in terms of controls, so people can just kind of, you know, pull down a React control, wrap it in some PowerShell, and then have it in Universal Dashboard. One other cool control, gotta do a little marketing, right? This is one of like the pro controls. It's a EvoChart control, and it can create things like heat maps. And in this case, I just have a bunch of like food data, and it's all just getting random data. And then it produces this little heat map here so that you can like hover over it. And then items that are like you know, closer to 100 are more green, and items that are closer to 0 are more brown. Kind of thing. So again, this was imported like externally from this particular Universal Dashboard instance. So hopefully there'll be a whole bunch of new cool controls coming out of the community.
So there's a couple of questions again that are on the on YouTube.
Okay.
Can one do Azure AD authentication or Azure B2C authentication? Is that what you?
Yes. So you can do. I think in the last version of the Enterprise Edition, you can do Azure AD. So that was just added in, I think, 2.2. So, yep. But I don't know. I've never done B2C, so I'm not sure that.
I think that was the only question.
What's that?
Was that the only question?
I think so.
Yeah. Do you have an RSS module by any chance? Say we make this nice little module here, and now I want to have an RSS feed of what it's creating. Just out of curiosity, I think it's probably backwards, but
yeah, there isn't an RSS integration with this yet. But yeah, definitely anything you want to see, throw it on GitHub.
okay.
All right. Let's see. So I just want to touch on a couple little other things. These are kind of unrelated to actual like the UI itself, but this is how you create REST APIs. So using the new UD endpoint command, you can actually specify URLs. In this case, I'm saying I want the URL to be activity, I want the method to be get, and I want the endpoint to do this stuff. So anytime that you invoke REST method on this URL, it's going to actually invoke this endpoint. And in this case, I'm just calling like get Strava activity commandlet. So if we actually pop into here, what I'm actually going to do, grab this invoke REST method, copy and paste that into there, and that's actually going to go to it's actually going to call into Universal Dashboard at API/athlete, and then it's specifying my Strava API token, passing that to the get Java activity commandlet, and then returning that data as JSON back to the server or back to the client.
Oh, impressive.
That's awesome.
That's impressive, Adam. That's cool. Part of the, is that part of the free bit or is that part of the advanced bit?
Free bit. That's all free. So the only thing that's not free is authentication for the REST API. So you can actually set up authentication using JSON Web Tokens to the REST API if you want to like protect it. But yep, this is free.
So what on your site, does it list the price points if you decide you want to go to your advanced version?
Yeah. So the advanced version is $100 a server. So that's where we're at right now. But yeah, that's all on the website. And then yeah, so you can do anything with these endpoints in terms of get, post, put methods. So if you actually want to send data back to the server, you can. And the other thing that you can do is take parameters. So if I wanted to like get a particular athlete, you could do something like this, where you can specify this as the URL. This is a variable in the URL, and then it'll actually provide that parameter to you, and then you can use that inside your endpoint to go look up that particular athlete or that kind of thing. So yeah. So
How long did it take you to get that, to make that? Seriously.
to make this, I don't know. I've been working on this probably a year and a half now, so it's all evolved. But yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, so you can, right. Yeah, that's kind of how you make REST APIs. I guess there's not much more to that in terms of everything you kind of expect from a REST API. So there is more to that, and you can kind of read about that on the docs. But this is kind of how you set it up. You have access to the request and the response cookies and all that kind of stuff. So you can like kind of manage your experience there. Yeah. All right.
How many sites have you set up?
How many sites have I set up instantaneously? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yes.
Lots. It's really easy once you can just say like, start dashboard, and then it actually spins up a web server, and then it's like boop, 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 boop. And then when you have this auto reload on, it's like really easy to just spin them up. So.
Sure.
So when you're building your scripts and whatnot for all this stuff, do you recommend just a straight up script, or do you recommend putting together a module, or do it in a modular approach, or have you seen people do?
So what I see most people do is, if you're building like a regular dashboard, what it tends to be like the most natural way of doing things is breaking out in pages. So you have different PS1 files for each one of the pages, and then you have like a master script that starts and loads all those pages, and then in terms of like data access and stuff, what I usually recommend for people is try to like put that in a module. So like if you have like something that goes and loads, like for example, I'm loading athletes here. I've created this Java athlete thing. Rather than like riddling my whole dashboard with like that kind of stuff, try to isolate where your data access is to a single place to make it a little bit easier to manage that. Yeah. So kind of on that same note is schedule endpoints, because it allows you to kind of do that a little bit. So that's the other thing I guess I would isolate into another file might be endpoints, because that's kind of different than pages and then the actual like skeleton of your dashboard, that kind of thing. And then, yeah, one other thing that you can do is to make things a little more performant, like when you call gets Java athlete, what it's actually doing is it's going out to this Java API. It's, invoking a Redbook request across the internet, downloading that data, all that kind of stuff. The other problem that I kept running into is I was hitting my rate limit for this Java API when I was building this, so it would like stop me. So what you can do is you can actually set up scheduled endpoints. So using the same command that you use to set up REST APIs, you can actually schedule endpoints that will just kind of run on an interval. So the first thing to do is use new UD endpoint schedule. And then every 10 minutes, I want to do this thing in this endpoint. And this is pretty configurable. You can do seconds, you can do hours and days. You can even do cron schedules. So if you want to get all crazy, like every Tuesday at 4:32 p.m. Then you just create a new endpoint, and then you have this endpoint script block that gets executed on that schedule. And then I'm calling the Strava API. And then what I'm doing here is I'm actually storing it in the cache provider. So UD offers two different providers that aren't usually in PowerShell. One is the cache provider, and one is the session provider. The cache provider allows you to just cache data. So it's available anywhere else in the dashboard. So I'm calling it in the schedule endpoint. I can actually use it in the UI. So rather than every time I load the UI, it's got to go up to Strava. Instead, what you can do is load it from the cache. So the schedule endpoint then is responsible for going and getting that data. And then I can have things like this REST API here that will actually just use that cache variable rather than going up to Strava. So I think if we...
Can you do, you could do traditional calls to like internal databases and that kind of thing too, could you not?
Yep, whatever you want with, they could do with PowerShell, so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So in this example here, I did invoke REST method and I hit my cache API rather than the regular one. And then that just got this value out of the cache. So it didn't have to go to Strava to get that. I didn't get rate limited. It's stored just in memory. Yeah. Like I mentioned, there's a session variable, and that one only applies to like when users log into your page. And that variable is, or that is like a session-specific cache where you can store things that are only accessible for that user. So that's a good way to store like state for a user as they use your dashboard. All right. Okay, so I am about at the end of this, and I just wanted to give you guys some more resources. So one of the new features coming in 2.3 is the ability to customize your navigation. So I'm just going to do that. And now I have this navigation on the left-hand side that has some resources that you can use. So I'd say the most important one here is the docs. So if you go to docs.universaldashboard.io, it has all the information about what I've talked about today, including a bunch more stuff. Particularly, I know people are asking about running dashboards. So here's how to run it in a Linux Docker container or a Docker container in Azure Web Apps. Two blog posts by Stefan. And then, some of the other hosting options, that kind of thing.
Question, have you been able to run it inside Azure Function yet?
I have not tried that. I've had people ask me that, though, but I have not tried that yet. I don't see why it would. I don't know.
Should work.
It should work, yeah. Yep, but I haven't tried it yet. I would say the second most important thing is the forums. We have actually a forum site that it's pretty active. People asking lots of questions about, stuff about Universal Dashboard and how do I do this, how do I do that. So that's a good resource. The GitHub repository. So if you want to check out the source code, file bugs, it's under Ironman Software / Universal Dashboard on GitHub. A lot of the stuff you can just search for. It's pretty easy to find. And then, finally, one thing I'm trying to push is the ability to publish dashboards. People keep making really cool dashboards and not sharing them at all. So I tried to set up some way for people to share dashboards. So if you do come up with a cool dashboard, I just put this thing on ironmansoftware.com to make it easy for people to publish dashboards to share with other people. So I actually have a couple of example dashboards up here that you can download. Like I have an Active Directory dashboard that kind of integrates with Active Directory. It lists your number of users, computers, breaks down by classes. You can search for objects and view their attributes, create users, reset passwords, that kind of stuff. So just as an example for people that want to get started with Universal Dashboards.
It's not mine now. That's something you built. So. I can't share mine.
Nobody can share yours. You can take a peek.
Yeah, I think a lot of dashboards end up being really company specific, and then it makes it hard for people to actually share them. So it makes sense, but I figured I'd try to give a good avenue for people to kind of try to share that stuff out. All right, that is the end of my spiel. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know.
When are you going to get rich off of this product?
I don't know. I don't know that ever happened. Yeah, it's kind of fun giving it away for free because a lot more people use it.
Wow, man, that's a great body of work that you've done there, Adam.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. You can tell. Do that when you went traveling too, because you went overseas somewhere for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, I was in Switzerland for a year, and that's actually where I started this. I was only working part-time, and I started working on this, so yeah. That's what gave me the nudge.
Okay.
Apparently, if I don't work full-time, I get bored.
Well, the only thing I thought about was, since you start the, I guess the dashboard, it starts the web server, or whatever. What web services is it using to host it? I guess you can say.
It is using the one that's built into ASP.NET. It's like not. It's like roll out my brain right now. What's the name of it? Kestrel. It's using the Kestrel web server. So
Okay.
that's Microsoft has actually produced that web server.
I was just wondering, since as you said, it can work on both either 5.1 or core, so I was just curious.
Yep. So the way this is built is actually right now it's actually shipping two separate versions of all the DLLs, which is kind of annoying, but it'll load the right one depending where you're running. Eventually that'll come together. The way that .NET has gone is they have .NET Standard, which now if you build something in .NET Standard, it will actually work in a .NET Framework app as well as a .NET Core app. So Universal Dashboard could go there. It's just been I haven't done the work to do that yet. And then it would be a single thing that you load up anywhere and it would work.
So I'll be curious about the session state stuff that you talked about. Is it possible to take that session state data and database it? So if you, for instance, if you had two of these running at the same time, you could use the same session state on app 1 versus app 2 if you had a balancer in front of it? You're going to do that?
That's currently not possible, but it's not possible in Universal Dashboard, but it exists in ASP.NET. There's the idea of a distributed memory cache that works that way. So I've actually had someone request or file an issue for that on the GitHub repo. I just haven't implemented it yet. But yep, it's possible. It's just not implemented yet.
Okay. It was just purely curiosity more than anything.
Yeah.
We do have a question online. Somebody's asking how many concurrent users could one UD PowerShell run space realistically support?
That's a very good question. I've done some performance testing. So I think I have a performance test that runs the REST API more or less. And it can do about 100 requests a second. So that if that gives you a feel. Now you got to think about like when your page loads here, you might have more than one request going at a time and that kind of thing. So there is a performance consideration when thinking about using this product. Unlike building something like in C# where it's kind of compiled code, this is actually running scripts. So
it's like early PHP, right? Early.
Right.
You get
yeah.
some kind of caching mechanism in front to make it work better.
Right. Yep. So I've had some people try to do some really complex stuff, and it hasn't worked when they scale, sort of thing. So you got to kind of think about what you're going to use this for, I think.
Yeah. So maybe an Nginx front end could help scale something like this, or something like that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Man, awesome stuff, Adam.
It is.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I love showing all this stuff.
Well, it was a pleasure. I could probably get you hooked up with the guy in Texas and see if he'll want to have you present there as well, if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. I would love to.
Anyway, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd be able to share a sandwich with us, but it takes a lot.
Well, yeah, sometime. I'm sure I'll run into you sometime. We'll share a sandwich or a beer.
Are you going to be at the conference this year?
Yep, I will be there.
Okay.
I'll be talking about this.
Well, awesome. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. All right, guys. You have a great night.
You too, man.
All right, bye.
So I've got my website hosting my house right now. I opened my garage door with functions with the website.
Nice.
And literally I have my Casa lights controlled by a website. My girlfriend is lazy. She doesn't like to get out of bed. So
Oh, wow. You're doing all your home automation
Yeah.
with it. That's really cool.
I just didn't want to use anything external. Might as well use a local
Sure.
site. So, but
I took the easy way out. I used Wink.
there's that too, yeah. But yeah, I saw this one about a year ago, and since I saw it, I reached out to him and bought a license at like, I think it was $20 at the time. So buy them now before they go up.
Oh, cool
Before he gets
stuff.
it big, huh?
Yeah.
Before he files that IPO.
Yeah, or it goes out there. Microsoft reunions get out, right? So
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's true.
Okay. I don't have my speaker lined up yet for next month. So when I either figure out something for me to speak about, or if anybody would like to speak, please contact me and I'll put you on the hook if you'd like. Otherwise, I'll try to find a topic, or I will find a speaker.
So this is my first time here, and I kind of just ran over Adam. I saw you had tickets up there. I didn't actually know what I was signing up for. Maybe we sign up for you guys' group for like.
So what I usually try to do is the event, when you sign up at Eventbrite, it puts you in a mailing list for MailChimp.
Okay.
I don't always remember every month to use it.
Yeah.
I try to, but I try to be on every month the same time. The only exception is if there's a calendar event like a holiday.
Right.
That we won't usually have it on the first Tuesday of the month. But you can bank on it being almost every month the first Tuesday. If I'm here or not, I'll have somebody.
And you guys are all local here? Are you guys?
Mhm.
I'm over in G-Town in Gilbert, so
Oh, nice.
I was up over there.
G-Town.
G-Town, it's a gangster for Gilbert.
I moved here from Austin. I'm
Oh,
actually,
nice.
I took a contract gig because I know a bunch of people in Austin. So I have been traveling back and forth to Austin
Nice.
to
Yeah, I
work a
saw
gig
you were
out
giving me
there.
like a job interview. I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
Okay.
try